Hello, my name is Gwendolyn Kukel, and I am a Master's of Social Work student at Grand Canyon University. I am currently enrolled in a class called Diversity and Social Justice in Social Work, which explores the foundation of knowledge needed to successfully engage diverse populations and advance social justice in our social work practices. So, one of the things this class emphasizes is systems of power and oppression and the cultural aspects of race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. And one of the projects in this class is to study the history of LGBTQ plus marginalization and discrimination so that it helps us to better understand how to advocate for and support this community of individuals in our future careers as social workers. So I chose to watch the documentary about the death and life of Marsha P. Johnson and how her activism and advocacy for the LGBTQ plus rights continues to inspire and inform social work practices today. What inspired me the most to choose this particular documentary was that it really shows the intersectionality of race and gender identity, sexual orientation, and it really highlights the complexities of discrimination faced and the marginalization that still exists today. I find myself looking at people and respecting people who are really authentic and true to who they are and who, they choose to be. And Marsha P. Johnson uses that authenticity that I really admire to serve as a powerful example of resiliency and courage. So let's go through this presentation. Let's see. The documentary about Marsha P. Johnson is called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson and was narrated by activist Victoria Cruz, who is a transgender woman herself and is a member of the New York City LGBTQ plus anti-violence program. And in this slide, I am highlighting four main points from the documentary that centers on the death of Marsha, but also her life. So, number one is about the investigation into Marsha's death. It centers on Cruz's investigation into the mysterious circumstances surrounding Marsha P. Johnson's death in 1992. Initially ruled a suicide, Cruz's efforts highlight the numerous inconsistencies and potential foul play. Number two is Marsha's activism and legacy. This film delves into Marsha's significant contributions to the LGBTQ plus community and the rights movement, including her role in the Stonewall Uprising. I think it's Stonewall Uprising, and co-founding the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. And the acronym for that is STAR, which I really liked. And she started that uprising or co-founding that STAR program with Sylvia Rivera, one of her best friends. Um, Number three is challenges faced by the transgender individuals. The documentary sheds light on the ongoing struggles and violence faced by transgender individuals, both during Marsha's time and in the present day. And the number four is the community impact. And through interviews and archival footage, which is really great in this film, it portrays Marsha's impact on her community. And it showcases her as a beloved figure who provided support and care to many, despite having her own hardships. So who is Victoria Cruz? Let's take a quick look at her. She is also known as Miss Vicky and is a longtime LGBTQ plus activist and survivor who began her journey with the Anti-Violence Project, otherwise known as AVP, as a client after experiencing her own sexual assault. Deeply moved by the support she received while she was there, she went on to volunteer, eventually rising through the ranks to become a senior domestic violence counselor advocate. It's a mouthful. And a close friend of trailblazers Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, Cruz dedicated her life to empowering queer, trans, and BIPOC communities through empathy, activism, and unshaken resilience. I love the quote that's on this slide from Marcia. It says, "I was no one, nobody from Nowheresville until I became a drag queen. That's what made me in New York, and that's what made me in New Jersey, and that's what made me in this world." And that, to me, that really sparks that power of authenticity that I was speaking about earlier in the presentation. And so in the next few slides, we'll walk through key moments of her life, starting with her early life, which shaped her resilience and deep empathy for others. We'll then explore her activism, particularly her pivotal role in the LGBTQ plus rights movements and her efforts to support unhoused queer and trans youth. And then we'll also take a look at her mysterious death, which continues to raise important questions about justice and how society treats marginalized communities like the transvestite communities. And from there, we'll place her story in a broader context, the historical context, examining the era she lived in and the systemic challenges she fought against. And then finally, we will reflect on Marsha's enduring legacy, how her courage and compassion continues to inspire generations of activists, including us as social workers. It's important that we carry forward her mission by advocating for quality, for dignity, and justice for all. So, Marsha P. Johnson was born in 1945 as Malcolm P. Johnson, as Malcolm Michaels, sorry about that, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and was raised by a working class Black family. She was initially assigned male and began dressing as a girl at age 5. Her parents did not support this self-expression, and she faced bullying and sexual assault, which temporarily halted her cross-dressing journey. And in 1963, she graduated from Thomas E. A. Edison High School and moved to New York City with one bag of clothes and $15. So the documentary highlights Marsha's role in the LGBTQ rights movement, as well as providing a vivid portrayal of the LGBTQ plus community in New York during the 1960s and 1990s and the challenges and discrimination faced by transgender individuals. So in 1969, during a routine raid on a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn, police handcuffed and pushed a few of the LGBTQ members into police cars outside, excuse me, in what was considered questionable charges. And at that time, New York was one of the vast majority of places that made it illegal to be gay. So the LGBTQ plus community was fed up with how the police were treating them. And so when they saw these public arrests, they chose to fight back. And it's unclear whether Marcia was, how much she was involved in the riot and what her role was. However, just her mere presence at the Stonewall Inn that night marked a turning point in LGBTQ plus activism and resistance against police brutality. In the wake of the raid on Stonewall, Marcia continued to be involved in a series of protests. This was instrumental in solidifying the gay rights movement and then the first gay rights parade that took place in 1970. I was 1 year old, so I do not remember that, but a series of gay rights groups, including the Gay Liberation Front, which is a more radical organization, and the Gay Activist Alliance, which is a more moderate and focused spin-off group, emerged as a result from those protests that she was involved in. Marsha was very active in speaking out against transphobia and the marginalization of transgender women. In 1970, Marcia and her friend Sylvia Rivera founded Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, also known as STAR. I'm going to set you aside here, which is an organization dedicated to sheltering youth and young transgender individuals who were shunned by their families. They also started the Star House, which was a safe place for those transgender teens to stay. And both Marcia and Rivera both had good feelings about the Star House in the beginning because they also had been homeless and came from a poor background most of their lives. So in Greenwich Village, the first Star House was in the back of a truck that had been left behind. And then Star House then moved to a rundown house that they eventually tried to fix up, but got shut down 8 months later. Well, the documentary was focused very much on the historical impact that Marcia made in activism. It also highlighted her death. Um, oh, didn't want to go forward yet. Um, it highlighted her death as playing a significant role in bringing attention to the ongoing violence against transgender individuals. Sadly, Marcia, her body was discovered in the Hudson River on July 6th, 1992, and it was first assumed to be a suicide, but many of her friends disagreed and suspected foul play. The LGBTQ plus community was outraged that the police refused to investigate further and that many news sources failed to even report her death. The authorities subsequently modified the investigation to a drowning with an unknown cause, and that ruling came in 2012. According to the New York Anti-Violence Project, 1992 was the deadliest year on record for violence against LGBTQ plus individuals. And honestly, when I read that, I was very sad. It made me very sad. Um, but it was reported that a large crowd attended her burial and that the chapel was so full that many people had to stand on the back of the at the back of the church and out on the street just so they could be part of the funeral. Um, the death and life of Marsha P. Johnson documentary related very much to the history of marginalization that is covered in chapters 9 and 10 of our textbooks in several different ways. And this slide might start getting a little complicated, but I think it makes sense. So the first is gender inequality and health disparities. The documentary highlights the systemic discrimination and violence faced by transgender individuals, particularly transgender women of color like Marcia, which mirrors this, which mirrors our textbook's discussion on how women from lower socioeconomic backgrounds face higher rates of morbidity and mortality due to the compounded gender and social class inequalities. Marcia's life and the struggles she faced exemplify these health disparities and the lack of access to adequate health care and social services. The next is intersectionality and marginalization, which is a common theme in both. Marsha P. Johnson, as a Black transgender woman, faced multiple layers of marginalization due to her gender identity, her race, and coming from the poor background, so her socioeconomical status. This aligns with the textbook's discussion on how gender intersects with other social categories like race and class and sexual orientation to compound disadvantages faced by marginalized individuals. Um, Cultural norms and social work practice. The textbook emphasizes the need for cultural, grounded approaches in social work practice, and it recognizes the importance of racial and social class awareness in addressing issues like intimate partner violence. And while the documentary highlights the role of activists like Marsha P. Johnson in advocating for the rights and protections of marginalized communities, it illustrates the importance of cultural, competent, and inclusive social work practices. Um, Social and legal discrimination. Both the documentary and the textbook addresses the legal and social discrimination faced by marginalized groups. Marsh's activism, including her involvement in the Stonewall riots, and then the founding of the Gay Liberation Front and STAR, the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionary, was a direct response to the systemic oppression and lack of legal protections for LGBTQ plus individuals. And the textbook points out that although US public opinion has advanced to the point that the majority no longer favors anti-gay discrimination policies and politics, legal, housing, and employment, a sizable minority continue to reject full acceptance of same-sex sexuality, that's tricky to say, on moral grounds. Goodness. The ongoing resistance to LGBTQ plus rights highlights the importance of continued activism and advocacy for marginalized communities. The last way that the documentary relates to the history of marginalization is by how it sheds light on the violence faced by transgender women, including Marsha, and the broader context of violence against the LGBTQ plus individuals. Similarly, the documentary sheds light on the violence faced by transgender women, including Marsha, and the broader context of violence against LGBTQ individuals. This connection underscores the importance of understanding how intersecting identities can elevate the risk of experiencing violence. The textbook discusses the elevated risk of intimate partner violence among women of color and immigrant women due to intersecting identities and systemic oppression. This connection underscores the importance of understanding how intersecting identities can elevate the risk of experiencing violence. And the textbook also emphasizes the need for culturally grounded approaches in social work practice that recognizes the importance of racial and social class awareness in addressing issues like intimate partner violence. That's why I like this slide because it all kind of points to why these individuals are marginalized. So that leaves us on the final key point in the documentary, which is Marsha's legacy. And Marsha's legacy is profound and diverse as a self-identified drag queen and a prominent activist. And we know that she was a pioneering figure in the LGBTQ plus rights movement and is best known for her role in the Stonewall riots. But Marsha was also a beloved figure in New York's Greenwich Village, which often is referred to, and she was often referred to as the mayor of Christopher Street for her welcoming presence and advocacy. Despite facing numerous personal challenges, including harassment and violence, Marsha remained a symbol of resilience and love. So during the year of 2019, New York City decided that, and they made the announcement that Marsha P. Johnson, along with her friend Riviera, would be the subject of a monument that would be commissioned by the public arts campaign that was called She Built New York. This would be the first monument in New York City to recognize women who identify as transgender. I just think that's so cool. And a waterfront park in Brooklyn was given the name Johnson in the year 2020 by the state of New York. And additionally, Johnson is now the topic of a number of documentaries, not just this one. And indeed, she does continue to be one of the most well-known and beloved campaigners for LGBTQ rights. In accordance with the social work competencies, the documentary provided some insight on how important it is for social workers to understand the societal and historical roots of social injustices. So with this part of the presentation, I have analyzed how the Christian worldview compares to the perspectives on LGBTQ plus issues. And as you can see, this is not going to be an exhaustive list, but just a short snapshot of how they compare and contrast. So we'll go down the list for the Christian worldview values first. We have love and compassion. We have moral teachings, support for the vulnerable, sanctity of marriage, and that gender is binary and rooted in creation. And lastly, sexuality should be expressed within marriage. So let's look at the social work value side of it. Um, we have dignity and worth of a person. Sorry about that. Um, and then we have non-discrimination with social justice, affirmation of LGBTQ plus relationships. Gender is seen as a spectrum and socially a construct, and sexuality expression is seen as a natural human activity. Now that we have this list, let's look at the areas that align. Both the Christian worldview values and social work value perspectives emphasize the importance of treating individuals with love and compassion and respect and dignity. The Christian worldview emphasizes the significance of unconditional love for others. In Matthew 20:39, he says, love your neighbor as yourself, which encourages us to love everyone, especially those who identify as the LGBTQ plus individuals, and aligns with the values of social work. And the second one we see here is support for the vulnerable, and it aligns with the social work value of social justice. Both perspectives advocate for supporting marginalized and vulnerable populations, which include the LGBTQ plus individuals. So if we're going to look at the areas that align, let's look at the areas that conflict. And this slide shows where each of these perspectives collide. For example, the sanctity of marriage conflicts with the social work values because gender is seen as a spectrum and social and construct, like we said before. And many Christian denominations uphold that the belief that marriage is a sacred union between a man and a woman, and based on biblical teachings, while social work values emphasize the importance of affirming and supporting diverse family structures, including same-sex marriage, and same-sex relationships. And then moral teachings versus non-discrimination conflicts because some Christian teachings view homosexual behavior as immoral and it's an immoral conflict. And social work values promote non-discrimination and equality for all individuals, including LGBTQ plus. So that's a great way to look at how the values conflict and align. Um, so as social workers, we can, there's a way that we can reconcile the conflicts in our practice. The first one would be we must be activists for change. And we have to be activists just like Marsha P. Johnson and encourage open dialogue and provide education and attend, and get education within Christian communities to foster understanding and more acceptance of the LGBTQ plus individual, which shows a shared value of love and compassion. We must develop inclusive practices that respect both religious beliefs and the rights of the LGBTQ plus individuals, such as creating safe spaces for discussion and support, or advocating for policies that protect their rights with LGBTQ plus individuals, with even within religious institutions, which is where I think we're still hung up after all these years. And lastly, we should collaborate between religious organizations and social work professionals to address the needs of the LGBTQ plus community and focus on the common goals like reducing discrimination and providing support. So I included this text from the National Association of Social Workers that informs us just how important reconciling these conflicts are. It says that the NASW asserts that sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression are legitimate and undeniable aspects of a person's identity. And so, consequently, the NASW denounces all types of conversion procedures as they are detrimental to the mental health and welfare of the LGBTQ plus individuals. These actions directly contravene the NASW's professional code of ethics and pose a substantial risk of damage by exposing patients to certain treatment modalities. I love that from the NASW. So this is the time in my presentation that I would like to provide a little personal reflection. And I'm going to shoot from the hip a little bit here and just go with my personal authenticity. Because as I reflected on the legacy of Marsha P. Johnson and I listened to this documentary, I thought about the core values of social work and how she is someone, especially when you watch this documentary, that it inspires you to to get that social work practice that includes these individuals that are so magnificent in what they do. I am compelled, and I will admit that I am compelled to examine my own biases and how they may impact my interactions with the LGBTQ plus communities moving forward. As someone who was raised in a very Christian family, very strict Christian family, this is kind of a discomfort for my family and for me, and has been throughout the years. So, excuse me. I acknowledge that I may have time at time may wander with some discomfort with my LGBTQ clients. But I have confidence that my commitment to educating and keeping my social work values at the forefront, I feel like that I am able to do that so that I may work with those people that and give them that safe and loving and caring and compassionate and real um, space. I have mentioned several times in this presentation that I value authenticity as a really high value. And I like people to be real and I like people to be transparent. And that's how what I strive to be. So I hold myself to that value, which is why I'm continuously striving to challenge and unlearn any biases that I may have. And, being a social worker has been my dream for as long as I can remember. And I know that it will require me to be spiritually competent. It will require me to be emotionally competent, and it will require me to be um, ethically competent. I don't have any room for discrimination, and I intend to keep it that way. So this project really taught me a lot about aligning myself more closely to the principles that Marsha P. Johnson stood for. And just like her, I have the ability to be, I have some words, courageous, trailblazer, compassionate, and iconic. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.